Mad River Glen is the creation of the late Roland Palmetto. Roland had created the lift company at Stowe to service the state ski trails on Mansfield in 1938. When vying commercial interests arose at the area, he searched for a place where sport would be the primary objective.
Roland challenged himself. He was an early kayaker. He was early in many sports. He was one of the first flyers in the U.S. Air Force. He loved a challenge, and he gave us that challenge, and I think on private land, we can keep it that way and not be responsive to other forces, whether they're economic forces or whatever, but we will always attract the people who just want to come for the challenge.
Together with interested friends, like Nagley Cook and Alice Demrosh Wolfe, Roland began a 2-year search for the spot that had a northeastern exposure to catch and hold snow and had challenging terrain with a sustained vertical drop.
At that time, I was working for the Mount Mansfield Company, which was a separate organization, and of course Cook and Palmetto were the prime movers in that. If they said, go here or go there, I went. They were the boss.
Very definitely, you can say that Roland left Stowe with the tremendous tourist development and recreational development over there and direction. And I know, bought this mountain when he found that it was on private land.
Well, he and Cookie decided that they wanted to locate an area where they'd have complete control of it. I mean, of the land and development and so forth. So we scouted around several different areas and finally settled on this place right here because there was a little available road to it.
So Roland and another friend, Bobby Schwarzenbach, who was a pilot, got a hold of a Piper Cub and started looking around for another mountain. And then they spotted the McCullough Turnpike, which was an abandoned highway project, which at that point had been stopped at the present parking lot. In late, I think it was in late April, and saw this Mad River with lots of snow in it. They climbed on skins and said, this has got great prospects. And Roland then negotiated with the Ward Lumber Company and managed to purchase all this property.
This was all woods in here. There was a little wood chopper's cabin just about where the engine house sits. I remember Cook and Palmetto and Bobby and Mrs. Cook did most of the trail location. I didn't have too much of that. Well, I said advise them a little bit, but mostly my work was locating the lift and getting it surveyed.
People just won't spend that kind of time anymore hiking and getting to know the mountain before they go up there with a saw to take down a tree.
And that was the year that Mad River couldn't complete the lift because they had so much snow. And they had union steel workers climbing the mountain, and they just didn't make it. And so we were forced to shut down, and they got us jobs in Stowe. We worked in Stowe, actually, our first winter in Vermont.
Yeah.
That was a low blow at the time, wasn't it?
It sure was, wow.
We had at least 3 or 4 feet of snow at Thanksgiving that year that we didn't finish it. Oh, it was unbelievable.
We'd had an open fall, probably finished that year.
Yeah, we could have finished it, but it took so long to put the work tram up too. I mean,
Yeah. They, anyway, we didn't finish it that year.
no,
Finished it next summer.
next summer.
The cheapest and easiest way to get the stuff up there was by this tram. Once it was in place, then they could stop it anywhere they wanted to and take up sections of the towers and eventually help pull the cable over the towers. A man from American Steel Wire was a construction foreman, Mac Johnson, and he was a good man. And he could, by ringing, stop the tram anywhere. Because the operator down the bottom had earphones. He was constantly listening.
The towers rose up General Stark Mountain one by one. The old abandoned CCC road was widened and bridges installed. But it would be 10 years before the state would finish the road and end the trying thaw and mud cycles. Stark's Nest was completed. Its architect, Sandy McIlvaine, graced the base of the slopes with a matching solar design building. Everything was ready for opening day, except Mother Nature. Even the appearance of General Stark himself, alias Sandy McIlvaine, was not enough to guarantee adequate snow to ski on. But the governor, who wasn't much of a skier anyway, took the first chair up, followed by Jane Peatman, the reigning Miss Vermont.
Sometimes the weather is a friend, and some years we've had very good snow. But I remember the first 2 years that I patrolled, when we went on sweep, it was getting toward dusk, and you could see sparks coming off the edges from running on mostly rocks and frozen ground. So
I guess my earliest memories here, really seeing Roland, and in those days, if you went along, there weren't any machines to groom the mountain, and there was just the patrol that was seeing that it was safe for people.
the first 3 years were really tough for snow, as most people know. There was none.
The first month that we skied here, which was in January, we didn't even ski here in December of '48. It was early January before we ever had a day on the mountain, and we skied only to the mid-station on the single.
World War II's 10th Mountain Division had taught thousands of men to ski, and after the war, many of them wanted to find a way of life that would keep them close to the sport.
And then I came over into Vermont and started up at Stowe, where I knew Charlie Lord. I talked with Charlie Lord. He said, go down to Mad River Glen where you'll be first. They had a ski area, but no place for the people to stay. So the Clarks were here a year before I was. The Martins moved in the same time I did at Tucker Hill Lodge. And Sewell moved in the same time I did, Sewell Williams at what he called Oola Lodge at the time.
And it seemed like a good life to run a ski lodge. I was young, single then, and the parties that we had, the fun that we had when we didn't have much snow. I used to advertise in the Harvard Lampoon, the Yale Record, and Smith College, Holyoke, Vassar. Snow or no snow, the place to go, house party atmosphere.
And this is when I was assistant patrol leader under Holly Slayton, who was the very first patrolman, a ski patrol leader. And we took a young fellow down about, I would say, 10 o'clock Saturday morning. He had a minor injury, a muscle strain or something like that. And I remember the doctor telling him not to ski for the rest of the weekend. And sure enough, mid-afternoon Saturday, got the same guy again. We took him down again. He had aggravated the injury. The doctor told him the same thing. First thing Sunday morning, we got a call. It was the same guy. I want to tell you, we gave him a ride like we have never given anybody else on the mountain. We were in the air coming off the bump on the lower Porcupine. We never saw him again.
We didn't have snow cats. If we had no snow, we foot packed the whole mountain. every bit of it. There was no other thing that would roll the snow down, you see? And so we'd have to pack everything by foot.
Did you ever pack with Murphy? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Murphy made us pack on sweep.
Yes, I can remember that.
Oh, God. I had a fit.
Jack Murphy,
yeah.
right.
Bless his soul, he's a great guy. But he really got a lot of work out of the patrol.
We could start a lot, couldn't we?
We had packed all day long. I mean, a lot of trips, and you figured, well, I look forward to sweep, I'll have a good time. No, sir.
Well, you couldn't gripe. At least you took a ride up the mountain.
We still do a lot of foot packing.
Good. It's good for everyone.
It is. And we try to get the instructors, the rest of the mountain personnel to help.
Yeah.
The patrol still is a lot of the social center on this mountain. Very much so, because it's so established.
Roland had a little place which was where the nursery is now that he called Hotel Molecule, which is about a quarter of the size of Chalet 10. And a group of us stayed there while we were working on Chalet 10, getting it in a livable condition. That was in 1954 when we converted the equipment shed into Chalet 10. The following year, the Hartford Ski Club built its building here, 1955, and...
Well, they were a dedicated Mad River crowd, you might say. We had the Whiskiers was one bunch, then you had the Miramar Club. These people were here all the time. You had the Amateur Ski Club people, and a lot of the clubs started to show up into the valley here, but basically those were the nucleus of it. And these were dedicated people. They still are. Some of these people will never leave Mad River.
There's nothing for us to come up almost every weekend in the wintertime. And we found Mad River to be a very friendly place. We always had groups of us that would ski together, not necessarily either the Hartford Ski Club or the Chalet 10 group, but people from all over, from New Jersey, New York, various places in Connecticut, even from Canada, that skied here. And everyone really loved Mad River.
I mean, that's what it was like in the 50s. It was really fun. We were all together in this.
As one of the founders of the National Ski Patrol in the 1930s, Roland realized the importance of a strong ski patrol system, and he fostered an on-mountain organization that continues to flourish today.
In the early days, we still had the best situation of any mountain in Vermont, which is we had a resident doctor here on a weekend, Dr. Pedley and Dr. Hyde. And
they had portable x-rays here, and they put a great deal of effort. This is the two doctors, Dr. Hyde. And, in fact, they were made honorary #1 and #2 national patrolmen in the country.
In the early years, there was only one paid patrolman. That was the patrol leader.
That's right. That's one of the biggest things that I got out of patrolling. Tremendous friendships out of the various people. People like Trucks Pratt, Dick Dale, Larry Marcioni. These three old guys here, and it's just great. They're good friends of mine. It was the biggest thing I got out of patrol work.
My son is named after Alan.
But the dedication to the sport, to being here, to being the patrol, our house was here, and everybody who was on that patrol who stayed with us was here every single weekend. You don't know what the 50s was like when you were coming through the mud. It took, what, 8 hours to get here from New York, on mud roads and country roads, and it was a long way to come and be committed to come every single weekend for 16 weekends in a row and be the Mad River Patrol. These were all bankers and advertising people out of New York.
And they survived car accidents, trips through the river with their cars, and all kinds of things. I've never seen such a dedicated group of people.
That's what it was. It was a kerosene space heater, and you walked in, the house hadn't been heated, so when we arrived that weekend, it was my birthday in March, the ceiling had fallen. Not only had we flipped into a river down below about 20 miles, but but that was typical of the difficulties of getting here, getting home.
There's a lot of work that people don't realize on here.
They have no idea how much maintenance there is for the safety of the people. I mean, if you don't care, well, it's another story, but when the people that ski Mad River, you've got a lot of thoughts for it, because they're really nice people.
No, a lot of fun to load that lift. Yeah, enjoyed it, especially a busy day when you had plenty to do.
Back then, we only had 69 chairs on there.
Originally.
There's 2 guys at the bottom. Either Klesson or I or Jack Larrow, George operated. Grab the blankets, heave them, they'd hit the other line, grab the kid, throw him in, close the gate and up the mountain. Now they have 5.
George would shag his fanny and he'd get his jumpsuit on, get on the lift, even just when the 3 of us, we were, then 2 of us took over then.
Yeah, 2 of them.
And George would go up through because he knew about where, and he'd tell us what chair it was on, what lift it was at. So you slowed it down so we could jump off into the tower right from, right from a chair, stood up, and I never did that because I don't like height.
Neither does Pete, no.
But George would step out and step into the
tower, and then jump back from the tower
jump back
into the
to
chair.
the tower, and this one come back down after he found out what it was.
The National Intercollegiate Downhill, which started at the top of the Catamount and went down the Grand Canyon down to the base of the mountain.
The first race I remember, which was the Intercollegiate Downhill, where I was at the bottom of the Catamount Bowl at the only gate and saw Chickagaya come down, and we had 1 gate all the way to the bottom. I mean, to run a downhill at Mad River with 1 gate to the bottom, and that was the bottom of the Catamount Bowl.
All of the trail preparation then was done by guys on skis or snowshoes and snow shovels.
There were no grooming machines. We'd all be out there sidestepping the race course to make it happen. Everybody turned up to help. But I've always said that it's love for the mountain that holds the community together. And I think that's what Roland gave us. He just built us a lift so we could all go up and enjoy the mountain. And I've never taken the chair to the top and wished I was on the bottom.
From his experience in Europe, Roland sensed the protection and support a dedicated on-mountain community would exert upon their environment. He also shared the European view of the importance of ski instruction.
He just felt it was of immense importance to have people up here learning to ski, learning to go out on the mountain, and trying to improve their skills on the mountain, and that the way you really had to do it at a mountain like this was through the ski school.
Bud was a very fast downhiller, especially, very good in slalom, awful good in slalom. And his technique was pretty much Bud Phillips's technique. He has adopted it from racing from the Europeans, and he wasn't a great all-bird skier. He was more of a fall-line skier. And he was a type of skier that when you went skiing with him, you had to move to stay with him. He was fast. Yes, it was very good. And things got pretty hectic around here because we started bringing more Austrians in, and we had quite a good team. It was really different. It was faster, and it was less traffic as you might find today. So we used to ski much faster also. See. We had a very good time skiing. If there wasn't that much ski school work, we were skiing. And one of the greatest places was skiing the lift line on #1 lift here. The single chair, when we had enough snow, all the way down. And you don't see that today. Over the ledges, everything. And I think now you can't do that because some of the rules have changed and it's a little different, see? But we used to be pretty wild. We had a good time. We'd go to the Mad River Bar. That was the old 19th hole. And that was a spot that everybody ended up. Right after we closed the lift, everybody was down there. The whole mountain would show up at the barn. Lesson, Alice Billings had that then. It was a fun spot. And of course, Saturday night, Bud's Dipsy Doodle, we would have that going. We'd have this, well, it was a pantomime effect. We even had people from the ski area that would act in this little stage we had set up there. I used to run the bar. There was no bars in the valley at that time. We just buy all the beer and stuff from Bolton's, that little grocery down the road. We have to have a big time.
chalk mark
I
on
think we
them.
should mention briefly some of the early ski patrol parties because they were pretty famous.
I want to know what you drank.
Oh, we didn't drink that.
Oh, you didn't drink? Oh, no.
Dr. Pedley's medicinal alcohol,
Oh,
I think,
really?
from the
What was
looks
it
of what
called?
happened to people.
Took a large bottle of aspirin. He always kept in the first aid room. It was that tall.
Oh.
Right? This leads into
one day, Tex sent one of his gals downstairs, and she said, "I'd like 2 aspirin." I got the big jar out, and I poured 2 aspirin out in her hand. She said, "Those are for me." She says, "Now can I have 2 more for Tex?" And I said, "That's going to be 15 cents."
Tex never gave nothing away. And he still doesn't give anything away.
Well, my name's really not Tex, it's Williford Thompson. I come up here in 50 anyway, when that was. But I was trying to think, the first people that I hired, they worked for 35 cents an hour. Gussie Graves and Joanne Irish, which is in there still with me now. She got 50 cents an hour. I mean, she come the second year, but I guess this is my home, I don't know. I've been here all these years, so.
People come visit, they come back to see Guy Livingston on the top of the mountain, come back to then, to have George Neal put you on the lift, to have, all of, see Tex in here, like, the employees were very much part of it. I think that's a little different than perhaps other areas where, maybe there's some old timers, but, there isn't that contact, in a way. So, it's very family-like in that sense.
With homes on the mountain and important holidays often spent at Mad River, many traditions are handed down year after year. And like sugaring, one of these traditions comes with Vermont spring, Easter, which starts with a service atop the mountain. This is followed by the annual Easter Parade, which has always been a part of the Mad River tradition. The obstacle course of 1955 was a one-time event.
Well, Roland was a strong one for the family, and that's why Mad River is set up so that you could let your children go by themselves, but sooner or later they all end up at the base spots because there's only one base spot.
This area grew from the original single chair with half of its present capacity and only 3 routes down the mountain to its present 4 lifts and 33 trails. And, the evolvement was a relatively slow process.
Mad River may be the last bastion of New England's graceful, winding ski trail, protected from the wind and sun by its trees. Of the original 5 trails, the Upper Mountains Catamount, Lift Line, and Fall Line have remained virtually the same, while the lower trails, Canyon and Porcupine, accommodated the gradual evolution of the mountain, and then the inclusion of the double chairlift in 1962 with its network.
Well, most of this trail development started out with, at least in my era, with Roland and I working out an idea on a trail route. And of course, you have to have a top and a bottom, so you figure out what happens on the mountain in between. And there are certain things, particularly on these mountains in the east, where the loggers have constructed roads and skidways, and they frequently follow routes that are also quite interesting as far as ski trails are concerned. So once we decided on basically what we wanted to do, then it was my job as on-the-scene manager to see that it got done. And in the course of building a trail, you encounter things that perhaps you hadn't anticipated, and it gives you an opportunity to play the part of sculptor a little bit. Perhaps try to save certain trees or circumvent certain undesirable spots, and I find it quite interesting to follow that.
Most places now have gone on a homogenizing trend. They straighten and widen and blast and fill and try to minimize any correlation between the sport of skiing and the existence of mountains. And they really want skiing to be like tennis or something, done with standardized dimensions and all like that. So Mad River isn't. And in the old days, all the mountains, they looked for mountains that had things like this, and they put nice little trails around using the terrain. And nowadays, it's exactly the opposite. They look for a giant snow cone, and they cut great parallel arcs down it. And so the difference is at Mad River, when you get down on a good day, it's very different. At most mountains, if it's good snow, you get down from a run, you say, that was great, what'll we do now? And at Mad River, you say, that was great, let's do it again. Because you want to try the other side of that corner, or the fall-away pitch on the inside, or whatever.
Today's skier is so indoctrinated in skiing wide trails that you may find it a little difficult to accept the narrow trails. However, the accomplished skiers, of which we have a high proportion here, really don't find that all objectionable.
The mountain to me is a gem, and it's something that's been cut by some of the master cutters that there are, and the amount of preparation that went into it, to one, understanding what the mountain was by walking the mountain throughout, in the wintertime, in the summertime, and understanding as closely as you could all of the contours and characteristics of the mountain. And then having just a tremendous sense of respect for the mountain. And the object wasn't to get people from top to bottom. The object was to give people a mountain experience. And the way you did that was by carving and creating trails that took you in and through the different parts of the mountain. And it's the change and the undulation and the differing pitches and exposures that would create different skiing experiences.
Comes a lot out of probably Roland. He would always drop by. He'd always want to get you doing something, exploring some new area, thinking about maybe we should have a trail here. It wasn't a program. It wasn't something you had surveyors and engineers and all of these things. It was something people actually did, so you felt that kind of involvement.
But we seem to have a high proportion of skiers here who have grabbed an axe or a chainsaw and gone out in the woods somewhere and created their own ski environment. The Paradise being the prime example.
As I think about the old times in Mad River, the one day that stands out in my mind is the day when Paradise was cut by the householders of Mad River. Late March, early April, when the hobble bush was almost covered. We'd ski down the fall line. Francis Woods, who was one of the earliest of the Mad Riverites, would lead us off to the left, and we'd be able to find our way sort of as if it were a glade down where Paradise now exists. And Ed Eaton had a house here, and he was an excellent skier, and also a very
good organizer. He put together a group of with 2 chainsaws, about 5 axes, 7 clippers, and we talked Bill Heinzeling into running the lift for us. And so we were taken up to the top of the mountain. Not that we were sure that Ken Quackenbush, who was then the manager of the lift company, entirely approved of this. And the group came on down the mountain, and they were to run the lift for us. But
For you and me.
well, were they?
Yeah. Well, I was getting pretty tired, and I think they figured that, the trouble was, when you were cutting, you were sitting there on a thing that's this steep, and you had your feet braced the whole time, trying to keep from sliding on down the mountain. By the time you got through cutting and chopping with clippers here and there all around, then you'd slide over a little further and chop some more. It was exhausting.
I think at the end of the afternoon, where there was something said about a jar of mayonnaise. And the mayonnaise, it was all used up, so the jar of mayonnaise was filled with a little bourbon whiskey and a little vermouth, and we had we finished the day off with great Bad River conviviality.
I think a lot of the kids who have skied Mad River since they were little will be more interested in the rat than anything else, because I look out of our window. I can see these children coming down there, and they are all having the most marvelous time. It's just wonderful, steady stream.
Racing has always been a part of the skiing at Mad River. Indeed, it's been encouraged. There were inter-house rivalries, club races, Eastern sanction races. In 1970, the Nationals came to Mad River.
Roland was very much in amateur sports, and he really believed in fairness, and it was more important to come out and participate in it.
I believe he was instrumental in starting the family tournament, which I still think is one of the greatest events we have here at Mad River. I think that's what the area is all about, really. And Roland's responsible for that.
It was the Metropolitan Ski Council races, and Trucks won the whole Metropolitan Ski Council races against trained skiers. Just because he'd skied Mad River, and that's always meant to me that almost any of our skiers who grow up or spend any time at Mad River tend then to win races.
In 1956, the British Ski Club gave Roland a license to stage a North American Kandahar on the model of the classic European race, which rotates among 5 resorts. This annual classic, rivaling Aspen Roach and Sun Valley's Harriman Cup races, continued for over 10 years until FIS rules required wider race trails.
We would start on the chute just below the first ledge, the upper ledge. Down the chute, and some years, if the snow was right, we ran it down the Grand Canyon. Other years, because of the canyon's exposure, we have to run it down the Beaver, which is a very difficult trail to run a race on.
I think in the early days, one of my recollections is that there were a lot more injuries per, say, 100 or 1,000 skiers, a lot more. I can remember Washington's birthday when we hauled, I think, 20 toboggans off the mountain.
I think that one of the biggest departures in 39 years is ski equipment itself.
Yeah,
I think that the advent of release binding, I'm an engineer, and I could never figure out what went on with early ski equipment, but all it was an evolution of snowshoes. And then there was enough money in skiing and skiing equipment so that they started to engineer it. And I think that's the big difference in the number of accidents you have per day here compared to 39 years ago. But in the early days also, if you hadn't brought a toboggan down by 10:30 in the morning, that was a pretty good start for the day. I mean, accidents were that frequent.
Yeah, but you didn't get here before 10:30.
Oh yes, Howard. Now, see,
You're in trouble.
I thought he said he was going to tell the truth. You see.
Yeah. Well, ask Alan. Ask Howard.
Yeah, well,
They used to come dragging in from Burlington at 10:30 in the
That's right.
morning.
You'd say, what have you been doing? Where have you been?
I don't know if you want to say anything about when they had the balloon, the parachute weekend.
Only at Vermont's Mad River Glen would daredevils leap through 3,000 feet of treacherous winds, jump into skis, and rip down icy mountain trails, racing the clock to the finish line.
And the insurance tab for parachuters was very high, prohibitively high for us. So it involved, when the race was staged, of waiting or hoping for good weather. You can't wait for it, you just hope that you have it on the day that it's scheduled.
The type of trails we have at Mad River, and then even more skiing off the trail in the woods.
From my understanding, Roland started skiing in the woods in Vermont in the 20s, and he loved the challenge of the woods and the soft snow.
Oh, das ist strictly verboten. It never happens.
Well, it's there, and lots of luck, and we hope you see you back again.
Ski with a partner, don't go in the woods after a certain time of the day. We try to make the woods off limits if the conditions are atrocious. This is a very difficult mountain to convince people that the conditions don't warrant going in the woods. People believe it's part of their right to go in the woods here. So it's a problem.
You have to do it at your own risk because we can't go in and make it safe. There, may be more or less snow in there, and there may be more or less trees down in there. But it is very much part of being on a Vermont mountain to be able to go through the trees.
It maximizes the correlation between skiing and the mountain, and it makes skiing really a mountain experience, a geographical experience, and not just an athletic experience. And it's great when you can find nice open places to just really ski and just go. And then you know that it hasn't been pre-manicured, and you're going to run out of spaces sometimes when you're unfortunate. And you learn something about the mountain, and it's like bushwhacking when you're hiking. It's not the quickest way down, but the reason for going up is not merely to get down as quickly as possible. Who's the best skier? Well, let's look for the guy with the biggest smile. That's how we'll know. That's what it means to be the best skier, is who's having the most fun. That's why you're out there. Not to be seen, not to have nice clothing, whatever. It's just, it's fun both because you're interacting with the mountain and because you're interacting with other people.
My memory of the early days of Mad River are just full of an atmosphere of great conviviality and working together, and everyone interested in the place, not just his own skiing.
I've got children of my own, and I find that what I would really like to do is have my children grow up with the enjoyment and the respect that I have, while at the same time allowing me to continue my own enjoyment and respect of the mountain here.
I just think that future generations will bring different kinds of boards, different ideas, different athletic moves, whatever, but we'll all challenge the mountain. They'll fall in love with that mountain and being there.
Vermont PBS, partnering with local filmmakers to bring you stories made here. For more, visit vermontpbs.org.